sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mountain fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. Here I raise mine Ebenezer, hither by thy help I'm come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God. He to rescue me from danger interposed his precious blood. Oh, to grace a greater debtor, daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness like a fetter bind my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it for thy courts above.
Please join me in the opening prayer. Come, Holy One, teach us your ways, lead us in your paths, and guide us on our journey.
Speak to us your words of life, for you offer us direction and wholeness when we hear your voice and follow. You bless us with your love, shower us with your grace, and help us grow in faith. We seek you, O God, with all our hearts. Be near us this day. Amen.
Our Old Testament reading today comes from Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 15 through 20. See, I have set before you today life and prosperity, death and adversity. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I am commanding you today, by loving the Lord your God, walking in his ways, and observing his commandments, decrees, and ordinances, then you shall live and become numerous, and the Lord your God will bless you and the lands that you are entering to possess. But if your heart turns away and you do not hear, but are led astray to bow down to other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall perish. You shall not live long in the lands that you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life so that you and your descendants may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying him and holding fast to him. For that means life to you and length of days, so that you may live in the land of the Lord, swore to give to your ancestors.
hear the gospel reading for today, which comes from the book of Matthew. You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, "You shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable of judgment." But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you are liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, "You fool," you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come quickly to terms with your accuser while you are on your way to the court with him, or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery." But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. It was also said, "Whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce." But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the grounds of unchastity, causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, "You shall not swear falsely, but carry out the vows you have made to the Lord." But I say to you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. This is the word of God.
Thanks be to God.
We follow the church calendar. So according with the church calendar, we choose the gospel reading. So now we are in the middle of gospel, Matthew chapter 5. So on the mountaintop, Jesus was still preaching. His preaching, as we know, began with 8 kinds of blessings to the people and to his disciples. It is called Beatitudes, right? We know the 8 kinds of blessings. And then after talking about 8 kinds of blessings, Jesus said to his disciples that they are the salt and the light of the world. And last Sunday at 11 o'clock service, we talked about how to live as the salt and as the light of the world. So to live as the salt of the earth is to share our blessings with other people so that we can preserve them as good people or blessed people by God. Just like we spread or sprinkle the salt on the food so that we can preserve them. And to live as the light of the world is to guide people with the words of God so that they can experience the joy of salvation and the conviction in salvation. This is how we live as the salt and as the light of the world. And now, in the verses of 21 through 37 that we read this morning, the way of Jesus' preaching seems to be changed very radically. His way of preaching is changed very radically. We just read it, right? In the previous verses 1 through 20, Jesus proclaimed the people are blessed and the disciples are the salt and the light of the world. But in these verses that we read this morning, Jesus taught about how to live as the true children of God, using the main do not rules of the Jewish society. The main do not rules in the Jewish society were: do not murder, do not do adultery, do not divorce, and do not swear by God or anyone in your testimony. And I think these are the main do not rules because they are related to the 10 Commandments. We heard about them in the 10 Commandments, right? So these are the main do not rules in the Jewish society. Using those do nots, Jesus' teachings this morning sound very strict. His teachings sound very strict, using these do nots. His teachings are more than do nots in action. He tells us to keep those do not laws not only in actions but also in thoughts and hearts. In other words, Jesus reformed the law of the Jewish society. Jesus reformed the do nots in actions to be the dare nots in our thoughts and hearts. Jesus reformed the do nots in actions to be the dare nots in our thoughts and hearts. Keeping only the do nots in actions cannot help us to reach the Christian perfection, which is the goal of life, as Jesus says in the last verse of this same chapter. Jesus says, "Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect." This is our goal of life. To reach the goal of life, we need something more than just keeping the do nots. Then how do we understand this harsh and strict reformation of the law by Jesus? How shall we understand the reformation of the law by Jesus? Would we rather really poke out one of our eyes when we sin with our eyes? And would we rather cut off our limbs, our hands and feet, legs and arms? Would we rather not marry again after a divorce? Would we rather not make any vow and any pledge for any reason and by any name, as Jesus just told us in this gospel reading? Is that why the church has been declaring and judging the individuals and the society as sinners, to be condemned for their immoral and evil actions, thoughts, and hearts? In the time of church reformation, about 5 centuries ago, some church reformers got the authority in the civil governments, and they declared the disciplinary actions against drinking, dancing, gambling, swearing, and many other kinds of secular entertainment activities. And even in this land of freedom, in the United States, there was the Volstead Act declared in 1919. And this act was supported by Christian organizations like Dry Crusaders and Women's Christian Temperance Union. So alcohol was prohibited, except in the church, right? Yeah, at the time, alcohol was prohibited except in the church and the hospital. And what do we see? What do we see in these fundamental reformation of the law throughout the history? Do we consider Jesus as also one of those fundamental reformers because Jesus said such harsh teachings today? Did Jesus poke out the eye of the adulterous woman who was dragged before Jesus? Did Jesus cut off the hand of the Samaritan woman at the well because she was divorced 5 times and married 6 times? Which means she committed adultery 5 times, according to today's gospel. And because she was still looking for another relationship regarding her current relationship with her husband, number 6, to be over, did Jesus cut off the hands of the money changers and the merchants of sacrificed animals in the temple because their hands were stained with greed for money? So did Jesus cut off the hands and feet, and did Jesus poke out the eyes from the sinners? No, he didn't. He didn't do anything to anyone. Then how should we understand today's gospel that Jesus talked about, which contains 4 kinds of main do nots? How should we understand those teachings of Jesus? When I was young, when I was a boy, I heard a lot of do nots in school, in church, at home, and almost everywhere I went to, except my grandma's house. In school, I heard, do not run in the classroom and do not run in the hallway. Do not bully each other. Do not talk loudly. And in church, I heard, do not open your eyes while praying. Do not talk to your friends while a pastor is preaching. Do not play with the microphone. And do not draw anything on the bulletin. And do not buy anything on Sundays. And at home, I heard more do nots than any other place. Do not pick up your spoons and chopsticks before your mom and dad pick up and begin to eat. Do not lean on your elbows when you eat. And do not stop by arcade game room right after school. You better come home right away. But I did. And do not watch TV until you finish your homework. Do not let the telephone ring over 3 times. Do not interrupt the conversation of grown-ups. This is what I used to hear as do nots. But now, as a grown-up who finishes the schoolhood, who is working for the church, and who is the father of 3 children, I understand why there had to be a lot of necessary do nots in my boyhood. And now, as a grown-up, school teachers, Sunday school teachers, pastors, and my parents seldom tell me the do nots. Instead, interestingly, I speak to the children of many do nots in church and at home, as I used to hear a lot. Is it not interesting? I believe all of you have experienced the same. When we were young, we used to hear a lot of do nots, right? And we, as grown-ups right now, we just hear a few do nots. And probably some of you may not disagree with me, but in general, because some people may say, oh, it depends on whom you marry, right? But mostly, yeah, as grown-ups, we don't usually hear do nots many times. Looking at the change from many do nots in the boyhood or childhood and to few do nots in our adulthood, I have a question. What caused the decrease of do nots in our lives? What caused the decrease of do nots in our lives? It is not because we are old and wise enough so that no one can bother us with do nots. It is because we have grown up enough to know and understand our own life situations than any other person understands and knows our own life situations. It is because we have known and we have understood our own life situation much better than anyone else, so we don't need the do-nots anymore. The outer voice of do-nots is no longer necessary, except the voice from God. Because He knows and understands ourselves and our situations much, much better than we do. Jesus, who knows and understands the frail and sinful humanity, He gives us something more than do-nots in our actions. He gave us dare-nots in our thoughts and hearts. In other words, just observing the do-nots written in the law of Moses cannot help us to grow up, but make us stay in the stage of spiritual childhood. Just do-nots cannot help us to grow up spiritually. We need something else for us to grow up spiritually. We need to grow up to be able to do something more and something greater than keeping the do-nots in our actions. Then how do we grow up? I could find out the way to grow up in today's gospel. Jesus repeats the way 4 times. And before Jesus says the way, He mentions the formula for spiritual childhood, saying the phrase, "It was said, it was said." Jesus says, "It was said" 4 times. What it was said are the main do-nots in the 10 Commandments. The formula for those who just knew who God is. But as for us, who came to know God by what was said to us, what was said by other people cannot help us to continue to grow up. We need the direct words of Jesus. We need the direct words of Jesus to each of us for us to grow. For that reason, I believe Jesus says, "I say to you," 4 times in today's gospel passage. Jesus' words to each of us, Jesus' direct words to each of us can help us to grow up. It was said in the Old Testament, keep the 10 Commandments. And it was said in the New Testament Gospel, Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 through 37. This is what Jesus said. But today, Jesus says to you, Jesus says to you, Jesus says to you. Jesus' direct words to us should be more than do-nots. And today and every day, Jesus says to us, "I say to you." Today and every day, Jesus says to us, "I say to you." Jesus may say to us, "It was said, however, today I say to you." Jesus gives each of us the dare not by saying, "I say to you" today. He says, "I say to you, dare not remain in the infancy stage of your faith or of your spiritual life. Dare not hide your sinful, lustful, and evil thoughts in your heart. I can fix you. I can fix your heart. I can fix you so that you can grow up. So let your hearts and minds open to me so that I can operate the open heart surgery, the open mind surgery that I have never failed to feel the love of God in the hearts and in the thoughts of people. I believe Jesus wants to say to us today, for our growth, what Jesus tells us is the truthful and trusting relationship. By saying, I say to you, Jesus wants to have the person-to-person, trusting and truthful relationship. Believing that Jesus is the only surgeon who can save us and change us from sinful thoughts and hearts. And Jesus is the one who can replace our thoughts and hearts with God's thoughts and hearts. Therefore, let us do something more than listening to what it was said. Something more than just keeping the do nots. Let us listen to what Jesus says to each of us right now. And let us open our hearts and minds to Him, trusting that He will save us and change us forever so that we can continue to grow in Him. Amen. For my everlasting portion, more than friend or life to me, all along my pilgrim journey, Savior, let me walk with Thee, close to Thee, close to Thee, close to Thee, close to Thee, all along my pilgrim journey, Savior, let me walk with Thee. Lead me through the veil of shadows, bear me o'er life's fitful sea. Then the gate of life eternal, may I enter, Lord, with Thee, close to Thee, close to Thee, close